Hello, I'm Dana Bourne, retired Brigadier General in the United States Air Force and Distinguished Fellow in Moral Leadership with the Howe Institute for Society. And today we are so honored to have with us the Honorable Gina Ortiz Jones, who's the former Undersecretary of the Air Force. So great to have you joining us for this conversation on moral leadership. Boston native, Boston University at least, Air Force ROTC, beginning your public service journey, joining the Air Force as an officer, serving in the intelligence community, deploying to Iraq, and following military service, continuing in your service as a special advisor in the Defense Intelligence Agency, as well as later in the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. You became the Undersecretary of the Air Force in July 2021, and throughout your career, you have been an amazing champion for civil and human rights. What a great honor it is to have you here.
Sure. Dana, we've got to start one place that's very, very important. I'm from Texas. I am a proud Boston University graduate, but I'm also a proud Texan. So I had to correct that. So you talked about, where I grew up, but my story really starts with my family's journey. I'm a proud first-generation American. My mom came to this country as a domestic helper. She graduated from the #1 university in the Philippines, but came here as a domestic helper. That was the opportunity. She wanted her shot at the American dream, so she bet on herself, and that is the cloth that I'm cut from. And she just reminded my sister and I every single day that we were lucky, not smart, we were lucky to have been born in this very special country, and we'd have to give back.
You have a history of really from the bootstraps, rising to the top of a steep leadership pyramid everywhere you've gone in various positions. And that has required a lot of integrity, compassion, humility, and an unwavering moral compass. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about individuals or mentors, people who have obviously recognized in you these qualities. Share with us what experience and individuals, mentors have shaped you during your life and your career.
One of those experiences is having served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And actually, that experience started when I was a cadet at Boston University. And, I was raised by a single mom. And when the Air Force said, hey, we'll send you to college and we'll pay for it, raised by a single mom, you don't leave money on the table. So I jumped at that opportunity. I didn't even visit the campus. But I will never forget one of the very first things I had to do at BU, Dana, was because Don't Ask, Don't Tell applied to me even as a cadet. And so I had to sign a piece of paper that said I will not engage in homosexual behavior as a cadet, even before my very first class. And, and I knew what that meant. I knew that, my opportunity to get an education, my opportunity to serve our country, my opportunity to die for our country if need be, all of that goes away just because at the time we did not have enough leaders with the courage, right? Courage, moral courage, whatever kind of courage you want to call it, with the courage to say anybody ready and willing to serve their country should have the opportunity to do so. So you better believe I have tried to be the undersecretary that I wish I would have had when I was that young cadet and that young officer. We just don't have time or talent to lose. I think serving under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, having had as a leader at this level, having had the experience of not being able to confide in your leadership or have the trust in your leadership that they were as committed to your success as they were to that airman right next to you, only because that was the policy at the time. And so I have every single day when I have meetings, I try to understand who am I not hearing from, right? Who am I not hearing from and why am I not hearing from them? Because I'm also quite cognizant that as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, the folks I'm engaging with are not going to be the ones that are directly impacted by the decisions that I and the Secretary will make, right? The folks I'm engaging with, these generals, the SESs, senior executive officers, they're going to be A-OK, right? It's the junior enlisted, it's our junior officers, those folks that are, hey, I want to start a family. Is this the right path for us? Is it not? I'm a trans service member. Do I stay or do I go? Right. And so it's really making sure I'm very deliberate in making sure that I am trying to hear all sides of an issue, understand the second and third order impacts of that. Again, having had the experience of not being able to speak up about how something was affecting me.
What's the best ethical advice you've received in your career? when, to help you approach some of these really difficult, challenging situations that really call for courage, moral courage.
My mentor in high school was actually my student government advisor, and still very close to him to this day. But he took me under his wing when I was at a very critical juncture in life. To be honest, I was not on a great path as a young kid. And let me just fast forward the story, but I was on probation for 6 months. I got into an altercation, had to go before a judge, and knew that I could do something better. And so he took me under his wing in high school, and he just showed me a better path. And that has been, I think, really important, but also, I mean, has showed, you've into those relationships, you've got to demonstrate that you're willing to learn and willing to listen and willing to be exposed to things that might make you uncomfortable. But I think if you're uncomfortable, you're probably learning something, right? And so I think find those folks that are going to help you, that are going to help stretch you a little bit, and invest your time and your energies in those. I think what's also been important are the number of folks that have not just mentored me, but had advocated for me, right? Because it's great to have a little coffee with somebody, they give you great pieces of advice, but it's those people in those rooms where decisions are being made, and they say, hey, well, what about Gina? Right. And so I've tried to do that myself in terms of, hey, what about so and so? I think it's healthy to, have, there's critical experiences, there's critical advocates and mentors, but I think you've also personally just have to be always questioning. And healthy questioning, I think, is always important in whatever environment that you're in.
And when you have to, I guess, wrestle with the nuance of these really difficult situations, where do you draw upon for that moral courage to do the right thing? Is it, from the head, from the heart, and how do you determine which one?
I think it's a healthy balance, but let me tell you where I start to figure out kind of where I lean on each of those things. I must spend, Dana, 90% of my day asking 3 questions in some form or fashion. But the questions are why not, and where's the data? Right. And so these really get to, they're very simple questions, but you ask them a couple of times and you get you get to see where things start to have some holes, have some assumptions, and potentially some bias. In the data, in what the data shows, and also in the data that we are not collecting, right? That is also illustrative of maybe some blind spots that we might have. So I think as I, in the course of my day, as I ask those questions, it tells me it tells me which way to go. But I think also fundamentally, it's also about, okay, well, how would I want to be treated?
So it's Women's History Month, and I wanted to, in the month of March, as we're airing this How Conversation on Moral Leadership, so I must ask, of your thinking about women in history who you admire, who comes to mind and who comes to heart for you?
There are some pretty amazing women in the Department of the Air Force that are making history today, that are serving today. And so I've got a picture of her in my office, actually. So Staff Sergeant Treviso, she is from a small town in West Texas, Tornillo, and she is the first Air Force woman to graduate from the Army's Air Assault School. And very proud of her journey and her accomplishment. And again, she is serving today. And if anyone were to Google Tornillo, that is a very, very small community. And so I'm just so proud of the number of women that we have serving today that are breaking barriers. I'm also thinking about, I'm going to mess up her last name, but it's Major P. So Major P is the first female Air Force officer to attend the Thai Air Command and Staff College. And one of the things, so I celebrated Women's History Month last year by doing a gender policy review. And this was highlighted for me as I was looking through packages one evening to select somebody to attend a commissioning program. In that slate of folks, though, there were 10 people, only one of them was a woman. And that woman in her waiver section had to submit a waiver because she was pregnant. And I was like, well, why do I have to know that you're pregnant just because you're applying for this program? I understand we're not going to send you to the course if you're pregnant, but just to apply to the course, it's not clear why that information needs to be divulged. And so that one just didn't make sense to me. But as a result of that, I also said, hey, what are all those gender specific things that we've got on the books that we could look at, right? as a result of that, it was highlighted that the Royal Thai Air Force did not accept female students into their mid-career professional military education. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm like, who signed off on that? Because that sends a real strong message to our force about who we may be willing to compromise on, right? And did we ask them to take those? Did we ask them to take our female students? What engagement? Because again, I think leaders really have to explain to their folks why things are what they are. And there have to be good reasons there, especially if you're denying somebody an opportunity. And so we worked with the Thai. They said, yes, we'll integrate. We sent Major P. As a result, the Thai also sent 5 of their own female officers. And so I think of those badass women in the Department of the Air Force that are making history every day.
It's a wonderful answer, and I'm so inspired by your example. I was selected as the first woman to go on exchange with the Royal Australian Air Force when they did not accept women, and somebody went to bat for me back in the mid-'80s. And so I'm grateful. I'm also inspired by your sense of, the question of the history. You went right to developing the next generation. And so it's a nice transition into my next question, which is to quote you from the House Summit on Moral Leadership. You said, I think a leader's #1 job is to develop more leaders. And in your answer to the Women's History Month question, you're really talking about that, about investing in the next generation. And so I'd like to ask a question of you now about how do you pay it forward to identify, mentor, and shape the next generation of moral leaders of tomorrow?
First and foremost, what you can always do is lead with your actions. Right. And so the perch as the undersecretary is really provide an opportunity to look across the landscape about some institutional changes that aren't onesies and twosies, which is always important, right? You make an impact where you can, but if you can make big, bold change, then doggone it, make big, bold change. And so one of the things, and maybe folks have already seen, this month's People magazine, very proud of the fact that they are highlighting one of the policy changes that I drove. It highlights the story of 2 pilots. They're married. They both fly the B-1, and one of them is pregnant. And she wanted to continue flying. And previously, we had rules that restricted her from doing so because the B-1 is an ejection seat aircraft, right? And so, based on that, there were some different considerations. But again, going back to asking the questions of why not, and where's the data, we were able to identify a way forward to ensure that we could balance safety. We could balance readiness, and we could balance the aircrew members' agency. And so, again, if you're going to deny somebody an opportunity, you better have a really good reason why. And so, very proud of the work that we did across the team to open up that aperture. And that People article highlights that she's one of the first women to take advantage of that. And so, when you're the first, that there are probably a lot of folks behind you that are watching you, and that you're going to bust open that gate for.
Fantastic. And in that pipeline of talent, and recognizing that our How Conversation on Moral Leadership listeners are across all sectors, and trying to elevate and inspire people of all different ages, you have some wisdom of what are some of the characteristics of next generation moral leaders that we need to pay attention to?
I think for anyone that asks me for advice, I give them the same advice, and I think it's this generation, it's the next generation, it's the next generation. It's just served me well, and so I wouldn't ascribe it to a certain generation. But first thing, be kind, right? Don't be a jerk. Be kind. Secondly, work hard, right? Do not get outworked. Do not get outworked. And lastly, be so good they cannot ignore you. Be so friggin' good they cannot ignore you. Too often, folks, when you're the only in the room, right, or you're the first, there can be questions about how you got there or why you're there. Those are not your questions to answer, right? You are there for a reason. Take up that seat, take up that space, and they will see very quickly how you got there and why you are there, and that you deserve to be there.
Wonderful. Well, you've been a trailblazer in so many ways, but remarkably, because you're the first openly lesbian woman serving as the undersecretary for any service branch. And it's been said that your leadership in your tenure and in all the positions you've held have really enabled all people, people first, mission always, all airmen, guardians, their families to serve their full potential. There's still people in organizations that aren't afforded that opportunity. There's still organizations that have work to be done to see the humanity in all peoples. What is the value from your perspective to organizations to enable people to be themselves, to be their full selves in work and in life?
Yeah, I'm proud to be the first lesbian to serve as an undersecretary of any military department. I'm also proud to be the first woman of color to serve as undersecretary of any military department. And so I think between those two perspectives, or even individually, right, it wouldn't be surprising to folks, or it shouldn't be surprising to folks that I would tackle the things that I've tackled. And I think that's important because this is, again, about understanding where we've got opportunities, where we've got challenges. And when we think about the Department of the Air Force, when we think about recruiting, retention, but even also, again, how are we attracting the best and the brightest into the Department of the Air Force as best as we can know ourselves, right? Because our best commercials are always going to be our airmen and guardians in uniform. Always, always. I mean, General Brown in front of an F-35, cool. However, when that airman goes into their home community and, speaks about the excellent time that they've had in the Air Force, the ways in which they've had just unique opportunities, there is nothing like that, because they're trusted, they know their community, and they know how to explain what the Air Force has, what the Department of the Air Force has done for them.
You have so much left to give in your life and your moral leadership. How are you approaching decisions on your journey to continue to serve in ways that inspire you in your values and your purpose? What are you thinking about in your future?
I've always thought about and asked myself the question, how can I best serve? Right? How can I best do that? And so I will take some time to reflect. I think it's what is really important for leaders to do as well is take time to reflect. It is hard when you're on kind of the hamster wheel to really do some long-term thinking, right? Some deep thinking, some long-term thinking. And so I'm really looking forward to a break. I've got a couple of ideas, and I'm excited about sharing those when ready. But I'm also looking forward to a little bit of a break.
Oh, and well deserved. And thank you for hitting on the point of the real necessity of taking a pause. And at the Howe Institute, we really take that seriously, and thinking about, a machine, when you hit pause, it turns off. But for us as humans, when we hit the pause button, that's really when we begin. And that time for reflection is so important for us to stay on our journey, that is our moral leadership journey. One last question, if you don't mind, and that is, what's provided you the greatest measure of personal and professional satisfaction in your life and your leadership?
At the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and said I did everything I could possibly do that day to best serve our airmen and our guardians. And similarly, I can say, I was a good person today. I was a good daughter today, a good partner today, good sister today. And so being able to look yourself in the eye in the mirror and know who you are, and know what you have done, be proud of that. I think you can't buy that. Right, you can't buy that. You can only that's here. That's in the heart. To your point, the head and the heart. That's the heart. You've got to make sure that you can look at yourself in the eye and be proud of what you've done. And I can certainly say that.
Well, the Honorable Jones, we thank you so much for your time with us for this Howe conversation on moral leadership. Great takeaway points. We just want to say thank you so much for your service, and also to thank you on behalf of our listeners and the Howe Institute for Society. Thank you for your sharing your wisdom with us, and we wish you all the best. Godspeed. Aim high, aim higher, as we say, in your future journey. I salute you and thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Pleasure. Thank you.